The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval training facility as Sarah Martinez stepped off the transport bus, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. At 22, she stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, her petite frame drawing curious glances from the other recruits who towered over her. Her hands, delicate and small even for her size, clutched the acceptance letter that had changed her life forever. She was about to become the first woman to enter the elite Naval Special Operations training program at Camp Pendleton. The facility buzzed with nervous energy as dozens of hopeful candidates gathered for orientation. Sarah found herself surrounded by men who looked like they had been carved from granite, their muscular builds and confident swagger making her feel like a sparrow among eagles. She kept her chin up, reminding herself of the grueling tests she had already passed to earn her place here. Her scores in marksmanship, tactical analysis, and physical endurance had been exceptional, even if her appearance suggested otherwise. Admiral James Richardson emerged from the main building, his imposing figure commanding immediate attention. At 55, he was a legend in military circles, having served 3 tours in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan. His chest displayed an impressive array of medals and ribbons, each one representing a story of courage under fire. Richardson had built his reputation on transforming raw recruits into elite warriors, but he had never worked with a woman in this capacity. His skepticism was written plainly across his weathered face as his eyes scanned the group and settled on Sarah. The orientation began with Richardson's trademark speech about the brutal reality of special operations training. His voice boomed across the assembled recruits as he outlined the 18-month program that would push them beyond their physical and mental limits. He spoke of night raids in hostile territory, underwater demolition exercises, and survival training in some of the world's harshest environments. Many would quit before the first month ended, he warned, and those who remained would emerge as members of one of the military's most elite units. During the weapons familiarization session, Sarah found herself assigned to Richardson's group. The Admiral distributed M4 carbines to each recruit, explaining the importance of weapon maintenance in combat situations. He demonstrated the proper technique for field stripping the rifle, his large hands moving with practiced precision as he disassembled and reassembled the weapon in under 30 seconds. The recruits watched in admiration, knowing they would be expected to match this performance. When Sarah's turn came, Richardson's expression shifted to barely concealed amusement. He held out the rifle toward her, but instead of placing it directly in her hands, he paused and made a show of examining her small fingers. Well, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm not sure those tiny hands can even wrap around the grip properly, let alone handle a real weapon. Several recruits chuckled, and Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she maintained her composure and accepted the rifle without comment. Richardson continued his commentary as Sarah began the disassembly process. In combat, Martinez, you need hands that can work under pressure, in the dark, in freezing rain, while bullets are flying overhead. These delicate little fingers might be fine for typing reports or filing paperwork, but out there in the field, you need strength and size to handle military equipment. His words stung, but Sarah focused on the task at hand, methodically breaking down the rifle component by component. The other recruits shifted uncomfortably as Richardson's critique grew more pointed. Look at Johnson there, he said, gesturing to a massive recruit from Texas. Those are warriors' hands, built for gripping weapons, throwing grenades, hauling wounded comrades to safety. That's what we need in special operations, not someone who looks like she should be arranging flowers or playing piano. The comparison was deliberately harsh, designed to break down confidence and weed out those who couldn't handle psychological pressure. Sarah completed the disassembly in respectable time, but Richardson wasn't finished. As she began reassembling the weapon, he leaned closer and lowered his voice just enough that only she could hear. I don't know what strings you pulled to get here, Martinez, but this isn't a place for affirmative action experiments. Real soldiers' lives depend on the people in this program, and I won't compromise their safety to make some politician feel good about diversity quotas. The accusation hit Sarah harder than any physical blow could have. She had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts throughout her military career, earning every promotion and assignment through merit alone. Her acceptance into the program had come after scoring in the top 5% on every qualifying exam, yet Richardson assumed she was there only because of her gender. She finished reassembling the rifle and handed it back to him, her jaw set in determination. Over the following weeks, Richardson's attitude toward Sarah never improved. During physical training sessions, he would single her out for criticism, pointing out her smaller stature as a liability in hand-to-hand combat scenarios. When she excelled at marksmanship exercises, consistently outscoring larger recruits, he attributed her success to luck rather than skill. During tactical planning sessions, he would interrupt her contributions and redirect attention to male recruits, even when her strategies were clearly superior. The psychological warfare extended beyond direct confrontation. Richardson would schedule the most physically demanding exercises immediately after Sarah had shown particular strength in other areas, as if trying to prove that her successes were flukes. He assigned her to equipment maintenance duties that required handling heavy machinery, then made pointed comments about her ability to manage the workload. Each challenge was designed to highlight what he saw as her fundamental unsuitability for special operations. Sarah's fellow recruits began to respond to Richardson's treatment in different ways. Some, influenced by the Admiral's obvious bias, started to question whether she belonged in the program. They would exchange glances when she struggled with tasks that seemed easier for larger candidates, and conversations would quiet when she approached groups during downtime. A few began to actively exclude her from informal training sessions and study groups, believing that association with her might reflect poorly on their own prospects. However, not all the recruits bought into Richardson's narrative. Marcus Thompson, a former Marine from Detroit, had watched Sarah's performance closely and recognized her exceptional abilities, despite Richardson's attempts to undermine her. During a particularly brutal survival exercise in the mountains, Sarah had demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness, helping several recruits navigate treacherous terrain and locate water sources when their planned route had been compromised by unexpected weather. Thompson began to quietly document Sarah's actual performance, keeping detailed notes on her scores and accomplishments. He noticed that her marksmanship scores were consistently among the top 3 in the class. Her tactical knowledge was exceptional, and her endurance during long-distance runs often surpassed that of much larger candidates. The evidence contradicted Richardson's public assessments, suggesting that bias rather than objective evaluation was driving his criticism. The tension came to a head during a particularly challenging week of underwater demolition training. Sarah had struggled initially with the heavy diving equipment, her smaller frame making it difficult to maintain buoyancy while carrying standard-issue gear. Richardson seized on this as evidence of her unsuitability, making pointed comments about the physical demands of underwater operations and questioning whether accommodations should be made for her limitations. Sarah requested permission to train during off hours, spending her free time in the pool working on technique and building strength. She studied the physics of underwater movement, analyzing how body position and breathing patterns affected performance. Within days, she had developed modifications to the standard techniques that actually improved efficiency for operators of all sizes. Her innovation allowed her to match and eventually exceed the performance of recruits who had initially outperformed her. When Sarah demonstrated her improved technique during the next formal evaluation, Richardson's response was dismissive. Rather than acknowledging her improvement or recognizing the value of her technical innovations, he suggested that the exercise parameters should be adjusted to maintain appropriate standards. His implication was clear. If Sarah could succeed, then the challenge wasn't difficult enough for real special operations candidates. The Admiral's attitude began to affect unit cohesion as recruits took sides in what was becoming an increasingly obvious conflict. Some candidates started to resent Richardson's obvious favoritism towards certain recruits and his unfair treatment of Sarah. They recognized that his behavior violated basic principles of military leadership, which emphasized objective evaluation and equal treatment regardless of personal characteristics. Sarah found herself caught between her desire to prove her capabilities and her growing frustration with Richardson's intractable bias. She had excelled at every aspect of the training that could be measured objectively, yet still faced constant criticism and skepticism. The psychological pressure was intense, designed to break down candidates who couldn't handle stress, but Sarah began to suspect that Richardson's treatment of her went beyond standard military training techniques. Late at night in the barracks, Sarah would review her performance records, comparing her scores to those of other recruits. The data clearly showed that she was performing at or above the level of most candidates, yet Richardson's evaluations consistently rated her as marginal or problematic. The disconnect between objective measures and subjective assessments became impossible to ignore. As the first phase of training neared its conclusion, Sarah knew that she would need something dramatic to change Richardson's perception. His influence over the program meant that his opinion could determine whether she advanced to the next level, regardless of her actual performance. The other instructors generally deferred to his judgment, and his reputation in the military community gave his assessments significant weight. The opportunity for a decisive demonstration was approaching. Richardson had announced that the final evaluation would include a comprehensive weapons proficiency test, requiring candidates to demonstrate mastery of multiple firearms under various conditions. Sarah saw this as her chance to finally silence the criticism about her capabilities, but she also knew that Richardson would be looking for any excuse to find her performance inadequate. She began preparing for what she knew would be the most important test of her military career. Everything she had worked for, every sacrifice she had made to reach this point, would come down to a few crucial moments under Richardson's scrutinizing gaze. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just Sarah's future, but also challenge Richardson's fundamental assumptions about what made an effective special operations soldier. The final weapons proficiency examination took place on a crisp October morning, with autumn leaves scattered across the training ground like fallen soldiers. Sarah arrived early, using the quiet moments before dawn to center herself and visualize the challenges ahead. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, practicing disassembly and reassembly of various weapons until the motions became muscle memory. Her small hands, once a source of Richardson's mockery, had developed surprising dexterity and strength through dedicated training. Richardson assembled the remaining 23 candidates in formation, his presence commanding as always. The attrition rate had been severe, with over half the original class having either quit or been dismissed during the grueling months of training. Those who remained represented the hardest and most determined individuals from across the military branches, each having proven their resilience through countless trials. Sarah stood among them, her petite frame still drawing occasional glances, but her bearing now carried the confidence of someone who had earned her place through merit. The testing protocol was comprehensive and unforgiving. Candidates would rotate through stations featuring different weapon systems, from standard-issue pistols to specialized sniper rifles. Each station required not only accurate shooting, but also rapid disassembly, cleaning, reassembly, and immediate firing to verify proper function. The exercises simulated real combat conditions where weapon malfunctions could mean the difference between life and death for entire units. At the first station, Sarah faced the M9 Beretta pistol, a weapon she had mastered during her initial military training years earlier. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she field-stripped the pistol, cleaned each component with methodical precision, and reassembled the weapon in under 90 seconds. The range officer nodded approvingly as she loaded the magazine and placed 5 shots within a 2-inch group at 25 yards. Richardson watched silently, his expression revealing nothing, but several other candidates glanced her way with growing respect. The second station presented a greater challenge: the M240B machine gun, a crew-served weapon weighing over 27 pounds when fully loaded. Many candidates struggled with the weapon's size and complexity, requiring assistance to properly mount and align the massive gun. Sarah approached the station with quiet determination, her smaller stature making the weapon appear even larger by comparison. She had studied the technical manuals extensively and practiced with similar weapons whenever possible, knowing this would be one of Richardson's focal points. Working systematically, Sarah broke down the machine gun into its major components, her movements deliberate and confident. The bolt assembly, feed tray, and barrel group separated cleanly under her touch, each part carefully cleaned and inspected before reassembly. Richardson moved closer to observe, clearly expecting her to struggle with the heavy components or make technical errors under pressure. Instead, Sarah's performance was flawless, her understanding of the weapon's mechanics evident in every motion. When she completed the reassembly and fired a perfect burst pattern at the distant target, Richardson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He made a notation on his clipboard, his pen strokes sharp and decisive, but offered no verbal comment. Sarah moved to the next station, aware that she was being evaluated not just on technical proficiency, but on her ability to handle Richardson's psychological pressure without faltering. The third station featured the M24 sniper weapon system, a precision rifle requiring not only mechanical knowledge, but also advanced understanding of ballistics and environmental factors. Sarah had excelled in marksmanship throughout her career, but the M24 demanded a level of expertise that few soldiers ever achieved. The weapon's complex scope adjustments and specialized ammunition required careful attention to detail that could not be rushed or faked. As Sarah began her examination of the rifle, Richardson suddenly announced a modification to the exercise. "Martinez," he called out, his voice carrying across the range, "since you seem to think you can handle any weapon we throw at you, let's make this interesting. I want you to perform a complete field strip and reassembly of that rifle, but with a twist." He paused dramatically, ensuring all candidates were listening. "You'll do it blindfolded." A murmur ran through the group of candidates. Blindfolded weapons disassembly was an advanced skill typically taught only to Special Forces soldiers with years of experience. It required not just technical knowledge, but also tactile sensitivity and spatial awareness that could only be developed through extensive practice. Many career soldiers never attempted such a demonstration, let alone under examination conditions with their future careers at stake. Sarah felt her heart rate spike, but her voice remained steady as she responded, "Understood, sir." She had actually practiced blindfolded disassembly during her personal training time, recognizing that such skills might be tested in special operations training. Her small hands, sensitive to texture and resistant to fatigue, had proven surprisingly well suited to the precise tactile work required for blind weapons maintenance. Richardson produced a standard military blindfold, the kind used for prisoner transport and specialized training exercises. As he secured it over Sarah's eyes, he leaned close enough that only she could hear his whispered words. "This is your chance to prove you belong here, Martinez. Don't embarrass yourself or waste everyone's time with a pathetic attempt. Real operators need to maintain their weapons in complete darkness, under fire when their lives depend on it." The blindfold blocked out all visual cues, leaving Sarah dependent entirely on touch and spatial memory. She extended her hands toward the rifle, her fingers exploring the weapon's contours like a pianist finding familiar keys. The M24's distinctive shape became clear through tactile examination. The heavy barrel, the adjustable stock, the precision-machined bolt assembly. Each component had a specific feel and weight that could identify it even without sight. Beginning at the rifle's rear, Sarah's fingers located the stock adjustment mechanism. The tool required to loosen the adjustment was typically found in the weapon's maintenance kit, but she had memorized its location and could retrieve it purely by touch. Her movements were slow and deliberate, each motion carefully planned to avoid confusion or mistakes that would be magnified by the blindness. The gathered candidates watched in fascination as Sarah's hands moved with increasing confidence across the weapon's surface. Thompson, who had been documenting her performance throughout the training, found himself holding his breath as she began removing the rifle's major components. Even Richardson seemed drawn into the demonstration, his usual critical commentary replaced by focused observation. Sarah's fingers traced the bolt handle, feeling for the precise angle required to unlock the mechanism. The M24's bolt was more complex than those found on standard military rifles, with multiple locking lugs and a specialized firing pin assembly that required specific handling. One wrong move could damage the precision components, or create a dangerous malfunction when the weapon was reassembled. With careful pressure, Sarah rotated the bolt handle and felt the mechanism release. The bolt assembly slid backward smoothly, its weight familiar in her hands from countless hours of practice. She placed it on the cleaning mat beside the rifle, her spatial awareness keeping track of each component's location despite her inability to see them. The crowd of observers had grown silent, recognizing that they were witnessing something exceptional. The rifle's trigger group presented the next challenge. Unlike simpler weapons, the M24's trigger mechanism was a precision instrument requiring delicate handling and specific tool usage. Sarah located the necessary pins and began their removal, her fingers detecting the subtle resistance that indicated proper alignment. Each pin had to be removed in sequence to prevent damage to the internal springs and adjustment screws. Richardson watched Sarah's progress with growing amazement. Her technique was not just competent, but showed signs of genuine expertise that typically took years to develop. The confidence in her movement suggested extensive practice, contradicting his assumption that her presence in the program was merely a political gesture. For the first time since her arrival, he began to question his initial assessment. As Sarah continued the disassembly, her hands moved with increasing speed and precision. The rifle's barrel assembly required careful handling to avoid damage to the precision ground surfaces, but her touch was firm enough to maintain control while gentle enough to preserve the weapon's accuracy. She had clearly studied not just the mechanical procedures, but also the underlying engineering principles that made the rifle function. 23 minutes into the demonstration, Sarah had completely field-stripped the M24 into its component parts. Every major assembly lay arranged on the cleaning mat in logical order, ready for inspection and maintenance. The complexity of the task and the precision required had been daunting enough when performed with full vision, but accomplishing it blindfolded elevated the performance to something approaching artistry. Richardson stepped forward to examine the disassembled rifle, his trained eye checking for any errors or shortcuts in Sarah's work. Each component was properly positioned, with small parts carefully organized to prevent loss. The disassembly had been performed according to technical manual specifications, with no damage to the precision surfaces or mechanisms. It was, by any objective measure, a flawless demonstration of weapons expertise. The reassembly phase would prove even more challenging than disassembly. Without visual cues, Sarah would have to rely entirely on tactile feedback to ensure proper alignment and function of the rifle's complex mechanisms. A single error in timing or positioning could render the weapon inoperable or, worse, create a dangerous malfunction during test firing. Sarah began with the trigger group, her fingers locating each spring and adjustment screw by feel alone. The components had to be installed in precise sequence, with specific torque settings that could only be judged by the resistance felt through her fingers. Too loose and the mechanism would malfunction. Too tight and delicate components could be damaged beyond repair. The bolt assembly required even greater precision during installation. Sarah's hands worked methodically, feeling for the alignment marks that would ensure proper headspace and timing. The bolt had to slide smoothly into the receiver while maintaining perfect alignment with the barrel extension, a tolerance measured in thousandths of an inch. Her small fingers proved advantageous in reaching the confined spaces within the receiver, making adjustments that would have been difficult for someone with larger hands. As Sarah neared completion of the reassembly, Richardson found himself genuinely impressed despite his initial skepticism. Her technique demonstrated not just mechanical knowledge, but also the kind of intuitive understanding that separated true weapons experts from merely competent soldiers. The blindfolded demonstration had revealed capabilities that her physical appearance had completely masked. With the final component installed, Sarah performed the function check required to verify proper assembly. The bolt cycled smoothly, the trigger broke cleanly, and the safety operated correctly. She had successfully completed one of the most challenging demonstrations in military weapons training, doing so under pressure and scrutiny that would have rattled experienced soldiers. When Richardson finally spoke, his voice carried a note of grudging respect that had been absent throughout the previous months. "Remove the blindfold, Martinez." As Sarah blinked in the sudden brightness, she saw expressions of amazement on the faces of her fellow candidates. Even the range officers, veterans of decades of military training, appeared genuinely impressed by what they had witnessed. Richardson approached Sarah directly, his bearing still formal but lacking the dismissive contempt that had characterized their previous interactions. "That was adequate," he said, though his tone suggested the compliment was more significant than the words implied. "Perhaps those small hands of yours have some practical applications after all." It was the closest thing to praise Sarah had received from him, and she recognized it as a crucial turning point in their relationship. The remainder of the weapons proficiency examination proceeded smoothly, with Sarah's performance remaining consistently exceptional across all weapon systems. Her demonstration had shifted the dynamic among the candidates, earning her a level of respect that Richardson's previous criticism had prevented. More importantly, it had forced Richardson to confront his own biases and recognize that his assumptions about physical requirements for special operations might need revision. As the day concluded and scores were tallied, Sarah found herself ranked among the top performers in the exercise. Her technical expertise demonstrated most dramatically during the blindfolded rifle disassembly. Had established her credentials as a weapons specialist of the highest caliber. The small hands that Richardson had mocked had proven capable of precision work that exceeded the abilities of much larger candidates. That evening, as candidates relaxed in the barracks and discussed the day's events, Sarah noticed a change in how others interacted with her. Conversations that had previously excluded her now welcomed her input, particularly on technical subjects related to weapons and equipment. Thompson approached her directly, offering congratulations on her performance. and admitting that he had been documenting her achievements throughout the training program. Richardson's evaluation report submitted that night reflected a dramatic reassessment of Sarah's potential as a special operations soldier. While he stopped short of enthusiastic endorsement, his recommendations now focused on her demonstrated capabilities rather than his concerns about her physical characteristics. The blindfolded rifle demonstration had provided objective evidence that could not be dismissed or explained away by bias. The psychological impact of the day's events extended beyond Sarah's immediate situation. Other candidates began to question their own assumptions about the physical requirements for special operations work, recognizing that effectiveness might depend on factors beyond mere size and strength. Richardson, too, found himself reconsidering evaluation criteria that he had taken for granted throughout his long military career. As Sarah prepared for the next phase of training, she reflected on the significance of the day's achievements. The blindfolded demonstration had been more than just a technical exercise. It had been a definitive refutation of every assumption and stereotype that had been used to question her presence in the program. Her small hands, once seen as a liability, had become symbols of precision and capability that no one could ignore or dismiss. The transformation in Richardson's attitude became evident during the following weeks as the training program entered its most intensive phase. Advanced combat scenarios replaced basic weapons training, with candidates facing complex urban warfare simulations and multi-day survival exercises. Sarah found herself integrated into team assignments without the subtle segregation that had characterized earlier phases, a change that reflected Richardson's evolving assessment of her capabilities. During a particularly challenging hostage rescue simulation, Sarah's technical expertise proved invaluable when the team's communication equipment malfunctioned in a critical moment. While larger candidates focused on breaching doors and securing perimeters, Sarah's delicate touch and extensive electronics knowledge allowed her to perform field repairs on damaged radio components under extreme time pressure. Her small hands proved advantageous in accessing cramped electronic compartments, enabling rapid diagnosis and repair that restored team coordination at a crucial juncture. Richardson observed the exercise from the control room, watching Sarah's performance through multiple camera angles and real-time biometric monitoring. Her heart rate remained controlled. Despite the intense pressure, her decision-making process was methodical and sound, and her technical contributions enhanced rather than hindered team effectiveness. The objective data contradicted every assumption he had made about her suitability for special operations work. The turning point came during a complex night infiltration exercise designed to test candidates' ability to operate in hostile territory with minimal equipment. Teams were inserted into a wilderness area with limited supplies and tasked with reaching a specific target while avoiding detection by opposing forces. The exercise typically lasted 72 hours and pushed candidates to their physical and mental limits through sleep deprivation, resource scarcity, and constant pressure from pursuing units. Sarah's team, led by Marcus Thompson, included 4 other candidates representing different military specialties. Their assigned route required crossing difficult terrain under cover of darkness, navigating by compass and map while maintaining radio silence to avoid detection. Thompson had initially worried about Sarah's ability to keep pace during extended overland movement, but her endurance training had paid dividends in building stamina that belied her smaller stature. 24 hours into the exercise, the team encountered an unexpected complication when they discovered that their primary route had been compromised by opposing forces. Intelligence updates indicated increased patrol activity along their planned corridor, forcing a decision between accepting higher risk or finding alternative approaches that might consume precious time and energy. The team gathered in a concealed position to assess options and develop a revised strategy. Sarah studied the topographical maps using a red-filtered flashlight that preserved night vision while providing minimal illumination. Her analysis revealed a potential route through a narrow canyon system that had been dismissed as impractical due to technical climbing requirements. The approach would require rope work and specialized techniques that not all team members possessed, but it offered concealment from patrol units and reduced overall exposure time. Thompson listened to Sarah's proposal with growing interest. Her route analysis demonstrated sophisticated understanding of terrain features and tactical considerations that went beyond basic military training. She had identified specific climbing anchors, calculated load requirements for rope systems, and planned contingency positions that showed advanced technical climbing knowledge rarely found among special operations candidates. When Thompson asked about her climbing background, Sarah revealed that she had spent years as a civilian rock climbing instructor before joining the military. Her small stature and low body weight had been advantages in technical climbing, allowing her to navigate challenging routes that defeated larger climbers. The skills had remained sharp through personal training, and she carried basic climbing hardware as part of her personal equipment loadout. The team implemented Sarah's alternative route, with her taking the lead position during technical sections. Her climbing expertise proved invaluable as she established secure anchor points, set up rappel systems, and guided less experienced team members through challenging passages. The small hands that had been mocked for their delicacy demonstrated remarkable strength and sensitivity on rock surfaces, finding secure holds that others might have missed. Richardson monitored the team's progress through GPS tracking and periodic radio check-ins, noting their deviation from the planned route with initial concern. When the Tactical Operations Center received Thompson's report explaining the alternative approach, Richardson found himself genuinely curious about the outcome. Sarah's route represented creative problem-solving under pressure, exactly the kind of adaptability that special operations required. 36 hours into the exercise, Sarah's team reached their objective ahead of schedule and without detection by opposing forces. Their successful infiltration through the canyon system had avoided all patrol activity while demonstrating advanced technical skills that exceeded program expectations. Richardson's post-exercise debrief with the team revealed the extent of Sarah's contribution to their success. Thompson's after-action report praised Sarah's tactical analysis, technical expertise, and leadership qualities during the climbing portions of the mission. He noted that her route selection had been strategically sound, her risk assessment had been accurate, and her execution had been flawless. The report recommended her for advanced technical training and highlighted her potential for specialized reconnaissance missions, requiring climbing or confined space operations. Richardson found himself in an unfamiliar position as he reviewed the documentation from the exercise. His initial assessment of Sarah had been based on conventional assumptions about physical requirements for special operations, but the evidence now suggested that diverse skill sets and body types might actually enhance unit capabilities rather than detract from them. Her technical expertise, precision motor skills, and specialized knowledge had proven valuable in ways that traditional strength and size could not replicate. The final phase of the training program included individual evaluations with Richardson himself, private sessions where candidates demonstrated their mastery of core competencies while discussing their future career aspirations. When Sarah's appointment arrived, she entered Richardson's office with quiet confidence, her bearing reflecting the self-assurance that had developed through months of proving herself against skeptical peers and instructors. Richardson began the session with a detailed review of Sarah's performance records, noting areas of exceptional achievement as well as continuing challenges. Her marksmanship scores remained consistently outstanding, her tactical knowledge had expanded significantly, and her leadership potential had become evident during team exercises. However, he also acknowledged that certain physical standards might always present challenges given her smaller stature. Sarah listened respectfully as Richardson outlined his assessment, but she was prepared with her own analysis of how her unique characteristics might actually benefit special operations units. She had researched historical precedents of smaller soldiers excelling in specialized roles, from tunnel warfare in Vietnam to technical infiltration missions in urban environments. Her argument was methodical and well-researched, demonstrating the strategic thinking that had impressed instructors throughout the program. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Richardson admitted that his initial skepticism about Sarah's capabilities had been proven wrong. He acknowledged that his assumptions about physical requirements had been challenged by her performance, particularly the blindfolded rifle demonstration that had forced him to reconsider long-held beliefs about weapons expertise. The admission represented a significant moment of professional growth for a senior officer known for his inflexible standards. Richardson then surprised Sarah by revealing that he had been in contact with specialized units that might benefit from her particular skill set. Advanced reconnaissance teams sometimes required operators capable of technical climbing, electronics repair, and precision weapon work in confined spaces. Her demonstrated capabilities aligned well with these specialized requirements, potentially opening career paths that had not been available to previous program graduates. The discussion evolved into a collaborative planning session, as Richardson and Sarah explored potential assignments that would maximize her strengths while addressing her physical limitations. Urban reconnaissance units, technical intelligence teams, and specialized training cadres all represented opportunities where her expertise would be highly valued. Richardson's network of contacts throughout the special operations community would prove invaluable in placing her appropriately. As the evaluation concluded, Richardson extended an offer that surprised even him. He invited Sarah to participate in an experimental program developing new training methodologies for technical specialists within special operations units. Her experience as someone who had succeeded despite not fitting traditional profiles could provide valuable insights for future candidate selection and development. Sarah accepted the opportunity with gratitude, but also with understanding of its broader significance. Her success in the program would influence how future female candidates were evaluated and what opportunities might be available to them. The responsibility was considerable, but she had demonstrated throughout the training that she could handle pressure and exceed expectations when given the chance. The graduation ceremony took place 6 weeks later, with families and senior military officials gathering to recognize the achievement of the 19 candidates who had completed the rigorous program. Sarah stood among her classmates, her small stature no longer a source of comment or concern, but simply one of many physical variations among a diverse group of highly capable soldiers. Admiral Richardson delivered the keynote address, speaking about the evolution of special operations and the need for diverse skill sets in modern military environments. His speech included pointed references to the dangers of stereotyping and the importance of objective evaluation in identifying talent. Those familiar with the program's history recognized these comments as acknowledgments of lessons learned through Sarah's participation. When Richardson presented Sarah with her special operations qualification, their handshake lasted longer than protocol required. The gesture conveyed mutual respect that had been hard-won through months of challenge and growth. Sarah had proven her capabilities beyond any doubt, while Richardson had demonstrated the intellectual courage to revise his assumptions when confronted with contradictory evidence. The ceremony's conclusion brought emotional reunions with families and friends who had supported the candidates through their challenging journey. Sarah's parents, both retired teachers, expressed quiet pride in their daughter's achievement while acknowledging the barriers she had overcome. Her father, a former Marine himself, understood the significance of Richardson's public recognition and the career opportunities it would create. In the weeks following graduation, Sarah reported to her new assignment with the technical reconnaissance unit that Richardson had recommended. Her first mission briefings revealed the specialized nature of her future work, infiltrating hostile facilities to gather intelligence on advanced weapon systems, conducting technical assessments of enemy capabilities, and providing expertise for unconventional warfare planning. The unit's commanding officer, Colonel Patricia Hayes, had specifically requested Sarah based on Richardson's enthusiastic recommendation. Hayes had followed Sarah's progress through the training program and recognized that her unique combination of technical expertise and special operations training filled a critical capability gap within her organization. Sarah's integration into the unit proceeded smoothly, with her new teammates accepting her credentials without the skepticism she had faced as a candidate. Richardson's public endorsement carried significant weight within the special operations community, effectively validating her qualifications and opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. Her reputation had been established through demonstrated performance rather than assumptions about physical characteristics. 6 months later, Sarah received a message from Richardson requesting her assistance with a special project. He was developing new evaluation protocols for the training program, incorporating lessons learned from her experience and other recent graduates. Her insights would help ensure that future candidates were assessed based on their actual capabilities, rather than superficial characteristics that might mask genuine potential. The collaboration marked a full circle in their relationship, transforming what had begun as antagonistic skepticism into productive partnership. Richardson had grown as a leader through the experience of confronting his own biases, while Sarah had proven that determination and expertise could overcome even the most entrenched prejudices. Their story became part of the program's institutional memory, a reminder that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources when given the opportunity to flourish. Sarah's small hands, once mocked as symbols of inadequacy, had become legendary within the special operations community. New candidates often heard the story of the blindfolded rifle demonstration, learning that true expertise transcended physical appearance, and that underestimating opponents based on superficial characteristics could be a fatal mistake in military operations. The transformation extended beyond individual careers to influence broader military policies regarding diversity and inclusion. Anyway, the community was complete and had concrete evidence that expanding recruitment criteria could enhance rather than compromise unit effectiveness, leading to revised standards that evaluated candidates more comprehensively. Her legacy lay not just in her personal achievements, but in opening doors for others who might not fit traditional profiles. Years later, when Richardson retired from active duty, his farewell address included specific recognition of Sarah's impact on his career and leadership philosophy. He credited her with teaching him that true military leadership required the wisdom to recognize potential in all its forms, not just the courage to lead soldiers into battle. The admission represented the ultimate validation of Sarah's place in military history and the enduring significance of her small hands that had accomplished great things.